Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin in about 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the New Hampshire Humanities Annual Celebration. Please welcome Marcia Schmidt-Blaine, the board chair of the New Hampshire Humanities, to the stage.
Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Directors and staff of New Hampshire Humanities, I welcome you to the 2023 Annual Celebration of the Humanities presented by Cambridge Trust Charitable Foundation. After several years of COVID-induced separation, we are so happy to gather with you for tonight's celebration. I'm Marcia Schmidt-Blaine, and it is my joy and privilege to serve as chair for the Board of Directors for New Hampshire Humanities. Tonight, we are kicking off our 50th anniversary year. New Hampshire Humanities has been in our community for 50 years. I hope you have had the opportunity to attend one of the statewide Big Read events this fall, joined your local library or historical society to take part in a Humanities to Go program, applied for one of the New Hampshire Humanities Community Project grants, or have benefited from the literacy or book groups that New Hampshire Humanities supports. For 50 years, New Hampshire Humanities has worked with partners like many of you to fund, support, and create free public programs for thousands of Granite Staters. Your generosity allows New Hampshire Humanities to continue our mission to inspire curiosity, foster civil dialogue, and explore big questions, and we appreciate it. I'm an historian, and I bet you're thinking, well, of course she supports New Hampshire Humanities. I believe it is important for all of us as a nation, as a state, as people, to know where we came from. However, my support for the humanities is broader than my professional role may make it appear. After all, the humanities serve as a foundation to understand human experience. The humanities work in the public interest to engage us with the past, to find commonalities with each other now, and to build respect for different perspectives and backgrounds. By connecting people together in shared experiences, the humanities create community where none had existed and connect us to one another. We need that now more than ever. To bring diverse and accessible humanities programs to thousands across New Hampshire every year, we rely on the generous support of partners who understand that investing in the humanities is investing in our communities and our citizens. No one understands that better than our 2023 presenting sponsor. So with that, I'd like to introduce Susan Mattori Baker, President of Cambridge Trust of New Hampshire, to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Marcia. It is quite an honor to be here. As Marcia said, I'm Susan Mattori Baker, President of Cambridge Trust New Hampshire, and it's just thrilling to be a sponsor this evening. I and all of my colleagues from the bank are so happy to support this organization. Cambridge Trust is focused on building relationships in the communities we serve throughout New Hampshire, as well as Massachusetts and Connecticut. Our goal is to be the trusted advisor and financial partner in many projects and a lot of events throughout our footprint. And we've been doing it now for over 130 years. You may have heard the recent announcement that we will be merging with Eastern Bank, and that will allow us to expand our business and expand our charitable commitments with a much stronger foundation, charitable foundation, and a very much expanded branch network. So we are looking forward to that in the first part of 2024. But with New Hampshire Humanities work, we have been a sponsor and a supporter for many years. It means so much to be here tonight and to be a sponsor of this event. and the humanities itself. They do such great work. It changes lives throughout New Hampshire, and that's why we're all here this evening. With that, I would like to introduce the Executive Director of New Hampshire Humanities, Michael Haley Goldman.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Michael Haley Goldman, and I'm going to stick to a script for once in my life. We do really appreciate Susan and Cambridge Trust Charitable Foundation. They have been really incredible supporters of the humanities for a long time, so it's really an honor to be working with them on tonight's event. And I'm also honored to have you all here for the biggest night of our year, our annual celebration of the humanities, a night made even more special by our kickoff of our 50th year as an organization. 50 years is not bad. What makes this evening so special is that we celebrate here with all of you. Some of you have been with the organization since the beginning in 1974, and I know of specific people, and I know you're out there even though I can't see you right now. Others of you, this might be your first NHH event. Welcome, one and all. You are all a vital part of the humanities in New Hampshire, and we wouldn't be here without you. Now, if you're new to New Hampshire humanities, and even for some of you who know us pretty well, it is easy to miss just how much we are doing in the state, how much we've done over the last 50 years. The humanities are a bit like infrastructure. Okay, I know that's kind of a boring metaphor, but let's just work with it, okay? Like infrastructure, the humanities is necessary, but sometimes invisible. There's an infrastructure of organizations and programs that provide cultural experiences in every corner of New Hampshire, all across the state. Last year alone, New Hampshire Humanities supported close to 600 programs, often working with the institutions you already know and love in your own town. The historic house near you might have received a grant from us to support their new exhibit. Your local library or historical society probably hosted our expert presenters for live lectures. The adult education center in your area might have used our facilitated reading program to help adults learn English. New Hampshire Humanities serves on an average about 20,000 people each year across the state. And we could not make that happen without an incredible amount of support. Before we can start our program, I have to stop and thank many of the individuals and organizations. First of all, starting with Cambridge Trust, I've already said that they've been just amazing to work with. They're our presenting sponsor, and they have been really supporting New Hampshire Humanities for such a long time. In addition, I'd like to extend a special thank you to our civic champion sponsors who helped make tonight possible: Grapponi Auto, McLean Middleton, and the University of New Hampshire. But wait, there's more. Thank you also to our annual partners who provide year-round support for our work: the Leslie Center for the Humanities at Dartmouth College, the Gregory J. Grapponi Institute for the Humanities at St. Anselm College, Northeast Delta Dental, and last but definitely not least, we appreciate the ongoing support of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I can't leave out our media partners, so they're important because when you're looking for our programs, who are you going to hear them from? We really appreciate the media partners we have: New Hampshire Public Radio, the Concord Monitor, Yankee Publishing, and especially New Hampshire Public Broadcasting. We cannot say enough about New Hampshire Public Broadcasting, NHPBS, and their help in making tonight's program available to audiences around the state and beyond. So thank you, NHPBS. What all our sponsors have in common is they understand that investing in the humanities is investing in the communities where they live and work. By supporting New Hampshire Humanities, they are helping build the humanities infrastructure that can help our communities come together, reflect, and thrive. I extend my heartfelt appreciation to them all. So, every bit as important as our sponsors, none of this work could happen without our individual donors. Many of you here tonight, and people just like you, we rely on all you in our community do to support us so we can provide quality cultural programming across the state. And so I thank you for that as well. Besides the investment of financial support, programs like tonight and programs that are happening all through the year could not happen without our phenomenal board and our hardworking staff, all of whom are named in your printed program. I'm not going to make them all stand up. You can't see them anyway. but I would love a round of applause for all the people who made tonight possible. So I've already said it's hard to spot the infrastructure that's all around you in the state. So tonight we're going to introduce a short video we're using as an introduction to the organization, and it'll give you a glimpse, just a tiny glimpse, of the programs happening in your communities all around New Hampshire and the impact they have on the lives of Granite Staters.
The humanities are that linchpin that holds the communities together and holds our society together. It's the way that we collectively understand the world around us, and it's the way that we collectively decide what we want to do into the future.
Every social studies teacher whom I work with today and I adore says the problem in America is civil discourse. We used to talk and we don't talk anymore.
These really big, vital, crucial, urgent questions.
If we never acknowledge our past, we don't know how we got here, we cannot build a future.
The enslaved people secretly go to people who knew how to read at risk, at great risk to themselves.
The tribal population decreased rapidly along the coast in those years.
Over a third of Americans can't name a single freedom in our First Amendment.
So important for New Hampshire Humanities to do this presentation.
Without them, we face a potential loss of our history and culture in the Granite State.
When you think about New Hampshire Humanities and kind of that larger role, we're here to help the people of New Hampshire understand their past, tell their story, and work together to build the future. One of the most important things we can do is bring people together in dialogue. How do people talk to each other, no matter what the problem is and what the question is? New Hampshire Humanities is there to help facilitate those kinds of conversations all across New Hampshire.
For years, our school has had a Community Reads program. That program is usually just our town library patrons and our students. By partnering with Perspectives and New Hampshire Humanities, we were able to expand our reach to also include Merrimack High School students.
It allowed people from different age, from different social background, to contribute and to be part of the conversation. You're basically confronting yourself when you're reading a book from a different culture, because it's all new. It's not you, it's you're looking at you in a mirror and asking yourself questions that are not the usual questions. And what that book did to the students when they read it, I had some students who cried at the end.
Reading the book, a lot of us in the beginning were a little confused. We didn't know where it was going. We were a little unsure about what the point of it was. But then getting to those discussions and getting to hear other people's thoughts was what really drove home the importance of it. Because we were debating back and forth what we thought things meant, what we thought the theme of the story was. A really valuable takeaway for me was just to hear there's no right answer with it, and that there's multiple different meanings behind everything.
It's hard for people to talk about difficult subjects, but nothing brings people together like talking about literature. It not only gets at some base skills that people really need in the community, but it actually brings them into a community of readers.
New Hampshire Humanities supplies books to our students at the International Institute of New England so that we can teach them not only English, but we can talk about financial literacy, health literacy, civics, and these books cover all those themes.
The school gives the opportunity for another people, where they come from Africa, Asia, Latin America. The books is tools for us.
Sometimes when they come to us because they're refugees, they are fleeing a terrible situation. When they have a character in the book that's gone through a similar situation, even if it's in the 1800s, they end up saying, she's just like me. If someone becomes emotional about it, the other classmates are right there to support them and say, you know what, that happened to me too.
The school made me happy because I was alone. Yes, I know my teachers, my classmate. I have a friend, my classmate. So the class for me is my family.
New Hampshire Humanities is often right there underneath the surface of what your organizations within a community need. How do you provide a program to a library? How do you provide a program to a museum? How do you provide an opportunity to talk to a community? Those are the kind of programs we create.
New Hampshire Humanities is extremely important. They're probably my #1 partner when it comes to event programming. The Bitter Injustice program that we worked with the humanities on is a collection of jumping off points of reading books about the Japanese American internment in World War II. We had 8 towns involved, 2 schools, and there was a museum. There were a couple keystone events where we had an author of one of the books and a gentleman from New Hampshire who was interned in an internment camp as a child. The people who came out, some of them were Japanese descent, and they told us later that they were really pleased that we took this subject on with humanities' help, and they felt welcomed in the community.
People think about their past, people read literature, people watch film, people go to see shows, and what I want people to think about is that you're already doing the work of the humanities. And what we want to do is provide you more opportunities to do it.
Programs like this brought people back out of the house and into conversations that frankly needed to be had.
I just think it lights a fire in the students that, okay, that's a possibility here in America.
So right now I have my license. That was my big dream, and I'm here. Right now I am at LNA.
Learning that no matter how young you are or like how little you know, like there's never too late or too early a time to start opening your eyes to the world around you. It's really important for us as citizens to be able to connect with each other and find common ground if we want to move forward successfully as a democracy.
What do we want the country to look like in another 50 years? What do we want to do about the very idealistic goals that we set out for ourselves as a nation 250 years ago? How are we going to think about who we want to become? And how do we actually take the steps to enact that, to make that possible? How do we decide who we want to be as a city, as a country, as a state? And how do we start moving to that future that we imagine together?
So obviously a video can give you a little bit of a glimpse of what we've been doing lately and over the last 50 years. And if you really want to talk about it more, I'm still here, so just ask. New Hampshire Humanities works best on the ground, partnering with local libraries, adult learning centers, and other organizations so people of all ages and backgrounds have opportunities to dive into literature, history, philosophy, and culture. It stimulates critical thinking. It creates deeper understanding of ourselves, a better understanding of our world. As an independent nonprofit, we rely on support from people like all of you here tonight to help us bring books and discussions to adult literacy classes, provide speakers and facilitators for important conversations in your communities, and deliver online programs for those who can't attend in person. No gift is ever too small. Every dollar truly matters and is matched by the National Endowment for the Humanities. Okay, so let me explain that. So every dollar we bring in, we are matching with federal money. So we are doubling the impact of your donation. If you wish to make a tax-deductible gift, there is a QR code on the back of your program, and so if you haven't done this before, you focus your phone on it and it'll pop up. Or you could shortcut that and look up nhhumanities.org/give. And so thank you for all that you're doing to support the humanities in New Hampshire. Now, we're going to move on to our main part of the program. But before we do that, we have the opportunity to take a moment and announce another part of the infrastructure of the humanities in New Hampshire. We each year give out an Excellence in the Humanities Award. The award goes to a Granite Stater that embodies service to the cultural landscape of New Hampshire. Our last award went to the amazing Jerry Ann Bogus, Executive Director of the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, recognizing her timeless work to promote awareness and appreciation of African American history and life. Now, unfortunately, Jerry Ann was going to be here to present tonight's award and can't be. But I'm going to ask my colleague, Mary Nolan, our program manager for many of our language and literature programs, to present in her stead. Mary?
Thank you, everyone. And as Michael said, my name is Mary Nolan, and I am the Connections Program Manager here at New Hampshire Humanities. And I am delighted to present New Hampshire Humanities' highest award to someone who has truly made the humanities her life's work. Her many years of service with New Hampshire Humanities include her role as a facilitator in our Connections book discussion program for more than 15 years. In this role, she worked with incarcerated men at Rockingham County Department of Corrections, in programs for people with differing cognitive abilities, and in many English language learning classes, in addition to training and mentoring other Connections facilitators. As a popular Humanities to Go presenter, her programs brought thought-provoking conversations to audiences of all ages across the state. In her role as a facilitator in our Literature and Medicine project, she helped ignite discussions about humanities and healthcare with participants in hospitals and clinical settings. And as a project humanist, she helped shape and scope the direction of many of our innovative grant-funded programs that invited Granite Staters and communities to explore new ideas together. For inspiring so many fellow citizens in her long pursuit of knowledge and understanding, we are pleased to present the 2023 Excellence in the Humanities Award to Marin C. Tirabassi. And congratulations, Marin. On behalf of everyone at New Hampshire Humanities, I would like to present you with a framed artwork by New Hampshire artist Dawn Blanchard as a token of our appreciation.
Okay. Thanks to Mary. I was so very honored to receive this award from her. I am delighted to be on the same stage, fangirl, of Jodi Picoult and Alexandria Peary. I've been thrilled to be invited to receive the award by Michael Haley Goldman, suggested for it by Mary, and supported in it by the long mentoring of Terry Farish and Susan Bartlett, who held the coordinator's position in the past. About 20 years ago, I wandered into the New Hampshire Humanities Council universe, and it is that because there were options for gigging in the programs. And I found instead of gigging, a source of joy because my teachers in life became the participants of the many programs I was given the gift of teaching and leading. I have a wonderful memory of literature and medicine when a surgeon and a hospital dietary aide argued over a book, first names only, no medical titles allowed. Touring with one of my Humanities to Go, in which middle school students and assisted living residents took on the roles, I made them do it, of hobbits, elves, and dwarves, having read you know what together. Traveling as a humanist facilitator for the NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness, New Hampshire tour of movies where the hardcore was suicide and the audience was families impacted by that experience and blessed by each other's presence. I remember reading Sarah Orne Jewett's White Heron with a Dover Community Partners art and literacy group and then taking them to see her house in South Berwick, Maine. And I remember struggling with men at the Rockingham House of Correction over the difference between their incarcerations and Mahatma Gandhi's. But most of my time has been spent in the Connections program with English language learners, which has so incredibly enriched me. So I'm just going to open a window on one day in a Manchester ESOL class with a poem I wrote when I got home one March 13 years ago. In Connections class today, I asked about parents and grandparents, those who went before, what they gave, what they taught. Elisabetta from Albania named her grandmother, who had a farm and loved flowers. She taught me to make a garden. Ruben from Uruguay said his father told him, work hard, respect your elders, and stay out of politics. Jose from El Salvador said his father, also Jose, said, no friends with long hair. Gladys from the Dominican waited a long time to share. Her mother died when she was 11, but she was the world failed her, but her fingers moved, and we could see Gladys's mother with her sewing machine and the tiny stitches of embroidery. And Zainab from Sudan put words to her mime. She taught you to make dresses? Si, yes. And so they spoke around the table until the last was Asha from Somalia, who never stops moving, laughing, swirling, her black and white hijab and gutino, 21, already married for 8 years. My mother wanted to teach me to cook, but my father said, no, I must go to school, I must read and write. When he was away, I learned to cook. When he was at home, I read and read. Now I can do anything. Thank you.
So thanks to Maren for, I had not heard that poem. That was really amazing. Every infrastructure needs its pillars. Maren is a pillar of the humanities in New Hampshire. So next up, I would like you all to think about the stream of news and information that overwhelms us each day. Emanating from your phone or your feed, the newspaper or news radio, we all struggle to make sense of the complex world around us and our place in it. Literature and stories have long helped us grapple with complexity, shined a light on other people's experiences and perspectives, and given us the tools to, as a community, shape our world. As author Jodi Picoult said in 2012, if you read a book that's fiction and you get caught in the characters and the plot and swept away really by the fiction of it, by the non-reality, you sometimes wind up changing your reality as well. The strength of literature in the humanities is that it drops us in experiences and ideas outside of our own and challenges us to reimagine our world. Tonight, I'm thrilled to have Jodi Picoult, an author whose books fearlessly tackle important and controversial topics, in dialogue with us and with New Hampshire State Poet Laureate Alexandria Peary, talking about their work, life as a writer, and the courage it takes to tell the stories of our times. Alexandria Peary serves as New Hampshire's Poet Laureate and is the author of 9 books, most recently the brilliantly named Battle of Silicon Valley at Daybreak. She is the recipient of an Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellowship, the Iowa Poetry Prize, the Notable Essay and Best American Essays, In 2021, she was selected for the Outstanding Faculty Award at Salem State University. Alex specializes in mindful writing, the subject of her TEDx talk, and many webinars and programs. Friends, please welcome Alexandria Peary. Jodi Picoult is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 29 novels, including Mad Honey, with co-author Jennifer Finney Boylan, Wish You Were Here, Small Great Things, 19 Minutes, and My Sister's Keeper. And this was new to me. And with daughter Samantha Van Leer, 2 young adult novels, Between the Lines and Off the Page. Jodi is also a co-librettist on 3 musicals, Between the Lines, based on her young adult novels, Breathe, and The Book Thief, based on the novel by Marcus Zizek, which just premiered at the Curve Theatre in Leicester, England. So anyone going to England? Jodi is the recipient of many awards, including the New England Bookseller Award for Fiction, the New Hampshire Literary Award for Outstanding Literary Merit, and the esteemed Sarah Josepha Hale Award. She holds honorary Doctor of Letters degrees from both Dartmouth College and the University of New Haven. She is a patron of the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction, which is awarded to female fiction writers. Jodi lives here in New Hampshire with her husband, has 3 children and 1 grandson, with another grandchild on the way. Please welcome me please join me, gotta get this right. Please join me in welcoming Jodi Picoult. Turn it over to you, Alex.
Wow, isn't this wonderful to see Jodi Picoult in front of us? Isn't this great, everybody? So we are so honored.
I think it's pretty great to see all of them,
I
actually.
know,
Yeah.
this is terrific. So in a 2009 Q&A, you said, I don't feel that I create characters, I listen to them. They come to me fully formed. And this sounds a lot like what Michelangelo once said of sculpture. Michelangelo said he listened to the marble. He said, the sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I start my work. It's already there. I have to chisel away the superfluous material. How do you move from listening to characters to writing about them?
That's probably one of the hardest questions that I could be asked. It is. I've long said that there's a very fine line between writing for a living and schizophrenia, and it's basically a paycheck, right? Because I hear voices like all the time. And these characters, they start peopling my head, and I really just listen to them. And they begin to take an idea away from me. And eventually, like, I guess I've been doing it long enough that I've learned to let them take the reins. That said, I kind of always know where my books are starting and where my books are ending. I don't really ever know how I'm going to get there. And it is the voices of the characters who are very, very real to me, who really get me from point A to point Z.
Okay, so speaking of characters that are very real, a series of very fast, rapid-fire questions.
I hope I remember.
Which Jodi has not seen, so this is a very big surprise. All right, which character would you trust to house sit?
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, so it would have to be Delia from Vanishing Acts. And the reason for that is because she has like this very highly trained dog, and right now we have a puppy who is the entirety of my existence because he's too little to be left alone. So Delia's gonna have to house it. Mm-hmm.
Which of your characters has the hardest time admitting they're wrong?
Oh, Nina Frost from Perfect Match. I mean, literally, the entire book is about that. Yeah.
Which character would you most like to rewrite?
Ooh, listen to that. Ooh. I don't know that there's any character that I'd like to rewrite, but there are certain characters that I wish maybe had a happier ending. Is that fair? So, I mean, I think a lot about Chris Hart from The Pact and where he wound up, and of course I think about Anna in My Sister's Keeper. Yeah.
Which of your characters would most likely become a New York Times bestselling author?
Oh, definitely that would be Delilah in Between the Lines, because I think that's literally what she does.
Which of your characters is the biggest tipper at restaurants?
Oh my gosh, these are such good questions. Who would be a big tipper? I have this feeling that Ian Fletcher from Keeping Faith would be a really big tipper because he's kind of a real tough guy. There's a word I want to use, but it's a swear, so I won't. And so, but I think he's a softie at heart.
Okay. Which of your characters is most likely to fib about flossing to their dental hygienist?
Probably their author, actually.
Okay. Which character most resembles you, least resembles you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the character that actually most resembles me, and I probably shouldn't admit this after what I just said, is Nina Frost from Perfect Match, the one who, makes all the wrong choices. But it's because I've always felt that I completely understood why she did the things she did. She is like a bear mom, mama bear. She's like, anyone crosses her kid, she's coming after you. And I think I would be like that. I just hope I wouldn't actually commit a murder in the middle of that. Yeah.
Which character would you seek out for spiritual advice?
I don't know that I would seek out anyone for spiritual advice, but I would probably go to Maggie in A Change of Heart. She's the attorney in Change of Heart. I would go to her mother's spa. How's that?
And the last one, which character would you marry if you'd never met your husband?
Oh, I know that one in a heartbeat.
Oh.
That's Patrick Ducharme, 100%, yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on to the section about her earlier years, your earlier years as a writer. Why did you want to become a writer?
I wish I could say there was like a drive that I had to, I was always going to be a writer, but the truth is I can't not write. It's not that I thought I was going to become a writer, because I didn't know anyone who actually was a writer or even made a living as a writer. I just had a lot of teachers who really encouraged me to do what I love to do. And I was very fortunate. I went to college in the 80s. Back then, there were lots of graduate schools doing creative writing programs, but I was able to go to Princeton and work with living, breathing writers. And for all of those reasons, I had a lot of advantages stacked that allowed me to sort of, take this plunge and become a writer. I think, honestly, writers are people who can't not write. You might never be published, but that doesn't mean you're not a writer.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about your first story, The Lobster Which Misunderstood, which you penned as a 5-year-old.
I did.
Do you still have a copy?
I do not have a copy. My mother does. Okay. She actually pulled it out. She lives in Arizona now, and I asked her, I'm like, do you have a copy of this thing? And I illustrated it too, which I had forgotten. And I honestly don't even remember what it was about. I just remember thinking, if I knew the word misunderstood at age 5, I must have been doing pretty well.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I was always doing that. I was always making up stories when I was little.
All right. So in October 1989, the headline to your engagement announcement in the New York Times was 6 words: Jodi Picoult, student to wed. At that moment in your life, you were 23 years old. Mm-hmm. What did you think might replace the word student?
Well, I knew what was going to replace it. It was teacher, because I was a student at the Harvard Grad School of Education, and I was getting my master's in teaching. And I did teach 8th grade English for a few years before I wound up having a family and staying home and writing full time. And I fully believed that I would be a teacher. I come from a long line of teachers. I gave birth to several teachers. So, it seemed to fit in very well. But I actually, once I started writing, and I continued to write when I had kids at home. For a while, I either had a book or a baby. And then I stopped having babies and I just had books, which is actually really good because I have 30 books. So, a good
definition of menopause, right?
Right. But it was really, for me, being able to balance that with motherhood was a really good gig, and I was very fortunate to be able to do that.
Oh, okay, terrific. So I think the first published page of a writer is often like a fingerprint for their entire career, if they have a long career. And so in 1992, your first novel, Songs of the Humpback Whale, begins, In the upper right-hand corner of the photo is a miniature airplane that looks as if it is flying right into my forehead. It is very tiny and steel blue, a long bloated oval cut in the middle with its own wings. It is the shape really of the cross. It is the first thing my mother noticed when we received the photo in Massachusetts. You see, Rebecca, she said, it's a sign. What do you think of your first paragraph as tea leaves for your career?
All I can think is, God, I should have edited that. I mean, I'm going to give myself a little bit of grace because I was in my 20s, you know. But I think that when I think about the beginning of that book, that was an extremely complicated book. The first draft of that was 1,000 pages. It had 5 narrative voices. There were 2 women and 3 men, a mother and a daughter. The daughter told the story in reverse. The mother told the story going forward. Their narratives intersected in the middle of the country because it was a cross-country story in the middle of the narrative. And then the 3 men who sort of circled in and out of their lives were the 3 other sort of constant narratives. And when I think about that book, I think, wow, I had so many more brain cells before I had kids, you know? But I do think that that very first paragraph, I remember thinking about it like the very beginning of 100 Years of Solitude, you know, which has the most amazing first line ever. I'm going to misquote it, but it's something like, as Colonel Aurelio Buendia faced the firing squad, he thought back to that afternoon when his father taught him or brought him to discover ice. And then it's like, you're like, wait, what? What about this firing squad? And you go back into this flashback. And this photograph is very, very important that you cited in that first paragraph, but you're not going to know about it until the very end of the book.
Okay. So what was the biggest professional or personal advice you've ever received that you initially rejected, and why?
So I'll actually tell you a story, because it's more like, it was more like a lesson than it was particular advice. I told you that I got to go to Princeton and I got to study with these amazing authors. And my mentor was a woman named Mary Morris, who, if you haven't read her, you should. She's incredible. But I was a straight-A student in high school. I never really had to work that hard. I got to college and I was doing fine. And I managed to get into the creative writing program, which you had to apply for. And the day that we were supposed to workshop my first story, I came in thinking, I got this. And Mary made me sit down on the floor in front of all these other students, and she gave me a glue stick and scissors and construction paper. And she said, you can't say anything, just do what everyone else says. And so the first question she asked was, where does Jodi's story really start? And some poor soul went, page 3. And she went, yes, that's right. Threw 3 pages over her shoulder. And for the next hour and a half, I had to sit there while they dissected my story. And I went out of there like I was shaking, by the time I left. And it took me a day to get myself together, and I went to her office hours. And I said, why did you do that to me? And she said, because you needed it, and you can take it. And I was so angry that I edited that story, and I edited that story. And finally, she said to me, you need to do something with this. And I was like, what do you mean? I mean, I was writing it for a class. And she said, you should send it to 17 magazine. And I did. I was a poor college student. I didn't even buy the magazine. I just went to a newsstand and I copied down the address from the masthead. And I sent it off, and a few months later, there was a message on my answering machine, because back then, friends, we had answering machines. And they were like, we'd like to pay you for your story.
Oh.
And I was like, who's punking me, right? I thought for sure it was a friend. And when I realized it actually was 17, I thought, wow, I mean, I would have paid them to take my short story. And that wound up being the first thing that I ever had published.
Wow, that's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
That's a really writers in the room, we should really take heart to that story. Do you ever reread your own books?
Like 50,000 times in the process of writing them, I mean, that's what editing is all about, because not only do you do massive overhauls before it ever goes off to your editor, but then you get an editorial letter back and you make structural changes based on that. Then there's a line edit, then there's a copy edit, then there's first pass pages, then second pass pages. So, I mean, I've read a book about 10 times before it comes out. Do I pick up a book once it's on the shelf? Very rarely. Usually because I have a character coming back from a previous book into a new one, and I don't remember how old they are. It's very practical.
So now we're going to move on to the part of this wonderful conversation we're having that's about Jodi's writing process. You're such a prolific writer that you've worn the letters off of 2 keyboards. How do you fuel creativity, and did you keep those keyboards?
No, I recycled them like you're supposed to. No, I think that I actually function better when I can write. If I get into a time of life where I'm busy or I'm not home or I have some idea brewing but I'm not able to get to my desk and write, I am very unpleasant to live with. So I'm actually much better off, being able to get that outlet out. Creativity is not always a good thing, right? It doesn't always feel good. I say that sometimes, like at the end of a book, it's like a monkey on your back, just going, And there are times when I will stay up all night for a couple of nights because I know I'm close to the end of a book and I have to finish it. So I don't know that I fuel creativity. I think creativity might fuel me. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about your writing space. What would we see? What would we see if we sat at your desk tomorrow?
Such a mess. I'm so sorry. It's really funny because I do so much Zoom stuff now, right? So I have all these beautifully organized little bins behind me, and I have my Black Lives Matter sign, and I have a big poster of a book. And what you can't see is the colossal mess right in front of my desk. I have stacks of books that I'm using for research. I have file cabinets with different folders based on the research that I've done for whatever my work in progress is. I have other files that include research for books that I'm still thinking of writing or research that I literally started to do yesterday. And because of that, my office is always a colossal mess. Also, because of the time of year, now there are like Christmas presents tucked in the corner and stuff that I'm hiding. So I have to say that I'm really glad you're all not in my office right now. That's all.
Okay, now legend has it that you are married to a delightful man who brings you a pot of coffee to start your writing day. Take note, spouse in the audience.
Yeah.
How does your family fit into your work life?
Well, my family mostly doesn't anymore because most of them are gone and having their own families. My husband is truly the best husband in all of New Hampshire. He's mine, back off. And he does make coffee every morning, and it's not a whole pot for me, but our mugs are so big that it pretty much counts as a pot. And he also, more importantly, will bring me coffee and lunch in the middle of the day, sometimes when I forget that I'm supposed to be eating or drinking. Honestly, I am so lucky. I met Tim when we were at Princeton. We both were on the men's rowing team together. I was the first girl on the men's rowing team at Princeton. You're welcome. I don't know how I got so lucky, but tomorrow is his 60th birthday, so everyone say happy birthday, Tim.
Happy birthday. How do you define success as a writer?
That's a really hard question because it's a moving target. And, I have been very fortunate in my career, but I've also worked my tail off. And I acknowledge both of those things. But success looks different when you're 20 than it does when you're, 57. At first, it was just getting a publishing contract. And then it was someone other than my mother reading the book, And then it was, could I get a follow-up contract? Would I ever land on the New York Times list? Can I be #1 on the New York Times list? Well, I really want to be on Good Morning America. There's always something you don't have, right? And even for someone who has had a great deal of success, like I think I have, there are still things that I'm like, oh yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? But I'm not greedy that way too. I also feel like I recognize the great fortune that I've had. To me, success really looks like a letter from a kid who read one of my books and said, I was suicidal, but I read this book and I realized I'm not the only person who feels this way and I'm telling someone today. That's an amazing feeling.
All right, so now we're going to move on to your connections with other people, collaborations, and the other controversies, the other C word here. So first off, you receive a massive amount of fan email. How much do you receive on a typical day?
It really depends on the time of year. When a new book comes out, I can get up to 100 emails a day from people. But, you know, like right now it's an off year because I don't have a book out right now. So, you know, I can get anywhere from like 5 to 20 a day, roughly.
Do you answer all the emails?
I answer all of them. And I mean, I don't have, this comes as a huge shock to people. And actually, I think I'm the only author I know like this. I do not have an assistant, unless you count my husband, who really is an unpaid assistant. But I don't employ anyone as an assistant. And I do, if I write you an email back, I really did read your email. I really did write you back a response. And I think that's really important because there are a lot of books out there. And if someone took the time to not just write, you know, read your book, but write to you and say, this really meant something to me. Look, I don't have to write you a 40-page response, but I can certainly have the good manners to say, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you read it. Thank you, for telling me about this part of your life too. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I mean, I just think that's a kindness, and we do need more of that in the world. So I think that's really important to do. Oh, but wait, don't get that excited, because I also write to people who write me hate mail. And I get a lot of hate mail. And I do that because we have come to a point in our society where there are keyboard warriors. They sit behind their keyboards, they write you terrible things, and they think you're never going to read it. So I don't know why they're writing them in the first place, but I want them to know there is a human being with feelings and a beating heart on the other end of that email, and that they need to be held accountable.
You are a remarkable collaborator. And most recently in 2022 with Jennifer Finney Bonaline in Mad Honey. And that's not counting all the collaborations in theater world. What's it like for you to collaborate on creative projects versus writing solo?
Okay, so let me tell you this. I had the most interesting experience working with Jenny. Jenny Boylan is an incredible writer herself, someone I had admired for a long time. I did not know her when she literally reached out on Twitter. She had had a dream that we were writing a book together, and that became Mad Honey. And there's this weird bias against books that have two authors on them in America. I blame James Patterson. Because, I mean, he's actually, I'm sure, a very lovely guy, but I imagine him walking through a stable of authors going, right, because he has like all these people writing with him. And I think people think, oh, if she co-authored the book, she didn't really write it. Well, I can tell you that co-authoring a book is twice as hard as it is to write alone. Because we literally had to plot the entire mystery out. We had to figure out who was writing what part. Poor Jenny, I kind of forced her to write her section in reverse, which is really hard. So I think that, and then we would write, swap chapters, and edit each other's chapters heavily, which is why it sounds, I think, like one voice instead of two. But that's twice the work. Literally, you are doing twice the work, even though you think you're writing half of it. And so if you see a book that's got two authors on it, instead of assuming that the author decided to phone it in, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt and think, oh, they worked really, really hard to make this really good for you.
You've also collaborated with your son, Jake, and your daughter, Samantha. To anyone in the audience who's contemplating collaborating on writing with a family member, hello, Simone, what would you recommend?
Well, so Jake and I wrote musicals together that we actually performed with a troupe called Trumbull Hall Troupe, which has been in the Upper Valley in New Hampshire for many, many years now. My friend Ellen Wilbur and I wrote music, and Jake and I had written some of the stories, the books of librettos together, and we performed every year and raised money for local charities, and it's still going on, and it's been fantastic. We are now doing licensed shows, and they just absolutely crushed Les Mis last weekend. But, writing with Jake was fun because he was very creative, and he also was very musical, so it was fun to be able to tease that out of him. Totally different experience writing with my daughter. When we wrote Between the Lines, we did it because it was her idea. She came up with it when she was 13. The concept behind it, it was a middle grade novel, basically. What if every time you closed a book, the characters inside it had lives and personalities different from the ones that the people they were in the book? And what if there was this teenage 15-year-old girl who was obsessed with a children's fairy tale because the prince who was illustrated in it was really, really hot. And she wanted out of her life because she was in the middle of a nasty divorce. Her parents were getting divorced. She was being bullied at school. And what if one day she discovered that this prince talked back to her and wanted out of his story as much as she wanted out of hers? And it was such a cool idea because, like, you know, who isn't waiting for Mr. Darcy to come to life still, right? So we decided that we would write this together, and we did. And she had a day job. She went to school. So during the summers, we would write. And she's probably the only person in my family who really understands what my job is, because she was at it with me every single day. She went on a book tour to 3 different continents. When she was in college, we wrote the sequel. We did it literally by speakerphone from 10 to 11 o'clock at night, which was the time that she had. And honestly, at the time, there were times I wanted to throw her out the window, you know? But there were also times where it was so cool to see that her brain creatively worked the same way as mine. I really do think that's genetic. And, you know, I once heard her, they separated us once. We were doing an interview, and I heard her giving an answer, and I was just like, what? That's exactly how I see things, you know? And I just thought that was fascinating. And the best part of it is, in spite of the fact that sometimes I, you know, did tell her, go clean your room, because I was angry, she wound up, I think, learning enough about the process that now she is a middle grade author with her own book contracts, which is really cool. Yeah, I'm really proud of her.
All right, a related question, but perhaps a selfish question. How did you keep writing such an attractive profession with your children who often have the front row seats to the pressures of writing and the publishing life? What lessons about the writing career do you think you bestowed on your children?
I always say that I think my kids definitely got their heart from their dad and their work ethic from me, because they saw me working a lot all the time. But you know what? I have flown like 40 straight hours from South Africa in order to be home in time to see my son in a school play. And I have always made sure that I'm there at the moments that I most need to be. And I was very fortunate to have a partner, a spouse, who was there for the day-to-day things that I couldn't be there for. So first of all, let me just say that any author who makes it look easy has help. And, you know, whether that is a spouse or a nanny or someone, there's someone out there picking up all the pieces so you can make it look like you're not paddling frantically underwater all the time, which you are. So my kids, I think they learned that. I think they learned that if you work hard, you can get results. I think they also learned that it's okay to shoot for the moon, because I have a really unlikely career. But if you don't try it, you'll never know if you can do it. And the other thing that I think was interesting is that they learned pretty quickly when they were young that there was like mom, and then there was public mom, right? So like, I still remember doing a reading once in Arizona, and Jake was there. I assume my other kids were too, but Jake, who's my middle son, was there. He was pretty little. He was probably like, I don't know, maybe 7. And we finished the reading, and I look out, and he's just like, he's fast asleep in a chair. And I was like, oh, that was his bedtime story tonight. That's nice. And there was another event that I think I did in New Hampshire at one point, and my kids were in the audience, and they were doing a roaming mic, and I didn't know who was going to get the mic. And all of a sudden, I hear this question, yes, I'm wondering, which child do you love the most? So there was always like that sense that I was also a public figure in some way, but they got really, really good at like taking people's phones to take pictures and stuff, and they've been very gracious that way. I'm very lucky. But the other thing that's sometimes really weird is, as they got older and they started reading my books, I have very distinct memories of going downstairs and being in the kitchen and my kids having a very spirited discussion about my book with my husband, as if I'm not there, like talking about like what the author could have done better, you know. And it's like, I'm right here, you know. And it's not even like 8 in the morning. So yeah, that's the caveat.
Okay, so your day-to-day life in Hanover.
Yeah.
Do people recognize you in the grocery store or the gas station? And what's the most surprising reaction somebody's ever had?
Well, let me just say, yes, people like know who I am, but a lot of people are just friends of mine too. I mean, but if I run into a fan, you can bet it's the day I haven't taken a shower. And, you know, I'm wearing my sweats or whatever. I also often will hike with friends in the morning, so sometimes I'm like still decked out in all my hiking gear. You know, I think if anything, people probably look at me and go, wow, she looks a lot better on her book jacket. But what I found is that honestly that I don't think I've ever had an interaction that wasn't really lovely. You know, I think if someone comes up to you in the grocery store or like at a movie theater and is like, oh, I really liked your last book. I mean, who isn't going to like that, right? I mean, it's a very lovely side benefit, I think, of this business.
Okay. So, which of your books feels like it's the most situated in New Hampshire?
It's funny, Mad Honey is set in New Hampshire. So I do think that's definitely a New Hampshire story. And I could even I could tell you what roads, you know, run through that town. But to me, the book that is most situated in New Hampshire is The Pact. And, I'm sorry, not The Pact, 19 Minutes. I'm sorry. The Pact also was in New Hampshire, but 19 Minutes is the one I think about. And it's because 19 Minutes is about a school shooting in a small town. And right after it was written, we had several schools that were given 100 free copies of the book so that they could read it as part of their curriculum. And my son's local high school wound up, there was a parent who was freaking out, convinced that, that the book was going to cause a school shooting, basically. And then they hadn't read the book because it hadn't been published yet, but they then found all these things in the book that they thought were coded for Hanover High. They were not. They actually were taken from Columbine and the school out there. But the fact that they could see themselves in the book was exactly the reason I wrote it. And the fact that it could happen and does happen in any community and is still happening. And it all blew over and it was totally fine. But because I thought about that book and how it could happen in your own backyard, and then I had this very bizarre reaction to the publication, I always think of that book as being New Hampshire based.
Related question. PEN America reports in its Index of Educational Intimidation Bills that 392 bills were introduced by parents, government officials, or citizens to intervene in K-12 decisions on reading material between January 2021 and June of 2023. One county in Florida has banned 84 books, including Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, Toni Morrison's Beloved, Sherman Alexie's The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, and Theodore Dreiser's An American Tragedy. 20 of your books, 20.
20 out of 84.
Out of 84.
Yeah.
I believe 20 out of 84, that's the highest number of banned books, and probably you've had more since we last talked, of any author on the list. When you were beginning as a novelist, could you have ever imagined this situation?
I mean, sure, because books were still facing challenges when I was a novelist starting out, but maybe there was one challenge a year or two challenges a year. Book banning has become epidemic in this country. You all should be worried about it, and it will affect you in New Hampshire if you think it will not. The county that you're talking about is in Florida. It's called Martin County, Florida. Just this morning, Collier County, Florida said, hold my beer, and they banned over 300 books at once without any parents knowing about it. They just pulled them all off the shelves. 3 of mine were titles that were banned there. Since 2020, book bans have increased 1,100% in this country. And wait, here's the best part. 11 individuals are responsible for the vast majority of book bans in this country. The reason why is because Moms for Liberty, which is very much a governmental organization at this point, is pushing a binder full of what they consider to be inappropriate material. So people who are affiliated with them go into communities, school board meetings, and they say, boom, these are all the objectionable books. In Martin County, Florida, where 20 of my books were banned, the parent who did the banning admitted fully she had not read any of the books that she wanted banned. Doesn't matter. Because of their parental rights bill, which was passed in Florida, the educators and the librarians are in a position where they need to remove the books before they're found with anything objectionable on a shelf, even though that definition is not clear, because a teacher who has an objectionable book on a shelf in Florida will incur loss of a teaching license, a felony conviction, and a $5,000 fine. Again, this is all driven by a parental rights bill. Remember that. That's going to come back in a second. In Martin County, Florida, the point is that once you pull the books, they have to review them all. The problem is there is no process for review. So it takes months for these books to even be considered whether or not they can be put back on a shelf. And that is months, or in some cases years, that kids do not have access to these books. So hang on for a second, because I am told all the time, big deal, it's a school library, who cares? Your kids can go get the book on Amazon. They can go to the public library. Well, that is not necessarily true. Because if you live in a rural area and you don't have access to transportation, you can't get to the public library. And a lot of kids cannot afford to go buy a book on Amazon. And that is why school public libraries even exist. A lot of people say, it's just a school ban. That's not really a ban. To which I usually say, when Donald Trump was banned from Twitter but could post on Truth Social, was that also not a ban? But what is really important is that these individuals who are trying to get books banned are very, very loud. The vast majority of Americans do not want books banned in schools. We have to be louder. And the reason I told you to think about a parental rights bill is because there is one right now up for discussion in this state. And we know where it's going to lead. Think about that when you vote.
You first had a particularly striking circumstance when you learned about one of your books being banned.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell the audience about that?
Yeah. So I have spent a lot of this past year over in England because I co-wrote the libretto for a musical adaptation of The Book Thief, the very beautiful book by Marcus Zusak. And yeah, good for Marcus. He's awesome. And beautiful, beautiful show. And I happened to be sitting in a theater, and I was watching a prop book be set on fire by an actor who was playing a Nazi, because my director thought it was very powerful to see that on stage every night. And as I was watching this, a notification popped up on my computer telling me that 19 Minutes had been banned in yet another school district. And I just thought, wow, talk about like a cognitive dissonance. I think we like to think that the past stays in the past. It's not only not staying in the past, but it's starting to look like our future.
Would you ever consider writing a novel in which a member of a group responsible for spearheading a book banning, including your own work, is the protagonist?
Do you know how many times I've been asked that question? I was driving down here with my friend Ellen. I'm like, I keep getting asked this question. And to be honest, I do not have plans to write that at this moment, and I'll tell you why. Because I am spending way too much time every day fighting book bans. I've been very vocal. I'm fortunate to have been asked to talk to Anderson Cooper, to have Rachel Maddow talk about me on her show. That's all great. The vast majority of books being banned, it should be said, are by BIPOC and LGBTQ authors. And there is this sense of revising history. If we pull something off the shelf, then that person's life or that person's history does not exist. We don't actually get to make that choice. And then the third big group of books that are being banned are the ones that they consider to be mature content, which is my books. I should also take this moment to point out that many of my books that have been banned for mature content do not have a single kiss in them. In fact, one of them was about the Holocaust, which is so sexy, isn't it? I don't know why these books are being banned, except for the fact that they have my name on it, and I've become a targeted author. So I think that, I don't even remember what the original question was, the reason, right, book banning. The reason I'm not going to write about that is because I am literally spending up to 4 hours a day talking to state legislators in different places, writing to superintendents, talking to the media, being very vocal on social media. It's eating up so much of my writing time that I think if I started to write about it, I would drown. So for right now, it is not the time for me to write about it.
In Wild Honey, a minor character grabs the hands of the main character on the subway after hearing that the main character's husband had verbally abused her. And then later in the book, a bartender gives Olivia's sister-in-law a drink on the house, thinking her bruises were a sign of physical abuse. Sometimes the acts of kindness and empathy in your novels arise from misunderstanding. Does that matter to you in the scheme of human interactions?
Absolutely, because I think that's the whole point of writing. I think that a lot of people come to my books with opinions, and that's totally cool. We all have opinions. But many of us learned those opinions when we were very little by listening to our parents or our pastors or our friends. And we haven't ever really asked ourselves, why do I believe what I believe? And what does the other side have to say about that? I may not ever get you to change your mind, but I may ask you and force you to question how the other side reached their point of view. And that's really the reason that I want to write. And I think that is where that space between what you believe and what someone else believes, that space is compassion. Reaching across it is an act of compassion. And so just the act of trying to understand somebody else, which sometimes can be almost accidental, which I think fiction is. I'm trying to teach you something accidentally. That becomes a very, very important way to grow empathy.
This fall, you joined other best-selling novelists, including David Balducci and George Saunders, in a lawsuit the Authors Guild has brought on behalf of writers against OpenAI. Can you tell us your concerns about OpenAI and creative workers?
Yeah, so I'm not allowed to talk about this a lot because it's an open lawsuit, and we've been warned against that, and we're mouthy. But what I can say is that we know for a fact that the authors who were joined together in this lawsuit, our work, without our permission, was used to train AI. And that is why if you go to, ChatGPT and you say, write a new ending for My Sister's Keeper, they can do that for you. The reason that we have joined together is because we have a certain level, I think, of profile and name recognition. If it's happening to us, you can imagine how it would happen to someone who feels like a more powerless author in the world. All we want is, we want consent, and we want our content to belong to us, which it does. We all have copyrights, but that has been violated. And if you don't push back, then it's going to get worse and worse and worse. We've already seen certain contracts that are saying, particularly for independent authors, we'll do an audiobook with an AI-generated narrator. Well, that puts all the human narrators out of business, right? So you start to see how you give an inch, and it just keeps on creeping and creeping. And without any kind of strictures around it, it's not just our work that's going to be stolen.
Jodi, what brings you joy in 2023?
Oh, man. This is a hard year for joy, huh? What brings me joy is my family, my grandson, who is apparently walking as of tonight, my daughter who's about to have my first granddaughter, my friends, the fact that I get to do something that I love, the fact that I am celebrating 34 years of marriage in a week, and really simple things, like the fact that I can enjoy a really great swim. My body is still holding in there enough for me to do that, and a delicious cup of coffee and chocolate. I think that honestly, that was one of my takeaways from COVID, which was a really scary time for all of us. That sometimes I'm moving so fast, I don't get to stop and see in the moment what is so glorious, and I'm trying a little harder to do that.
Do you ever expect to retire from writing?
Did my husband write that question? That's what I want
to
know.
He did, actually. He did.
You know, I don't know. I don't ever want to be the kind of writer who's turning out a book just because I have a deadline. I should stop writing before that moment because I don't want to phone it in. I want you to feel how engaged I am with the topic if I'm writing about it. I gotta believe that at some point I'm gonna want to not write, but as of right now, at least I can tell you that I know what I'm gonna write through 2026. How's that?
And I'm going to say, I know what you're currently working on, and I can't wait for that book. Okay, so...
oh, that's not fair. Look at them all.
You we're getting numbers in the background here.
All right, can I tell them?
I don't know. I'm going
to tell them.
I'm getting numbers in the background, so yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so I'm very excited about this book. It's going to come out in the fall. It's called By Any Other Name. And it is about gender discrimination in writing and particularly in theater, and how it really hasn't changed in 400 years. And I am going to convince you in this book through actual historical documents and with a real, true historical person that Shakespeare didn't write his plays, but a woman named Amelia Bassano just might have.
And as I told you when we were having coffee a couple weeks ago, I know quite a few Shakespeare scholars who might be having heart attacks after this one. All right, how would you like readers to remember your books?
My daughter and I have this running joke, actually, and I don't even remember how it came about, but we were talking about what's going to be on your gravestone. And I remember saying, you know, I always really liked that quote, you know, from Charlotte's Web. And she goes, oh, good writer, better pig? And I was like, no. I was like, that is not what I want on my gravestone. And recently, she wrote me, because she had to write her bio for her own books. And she said, what do you think I should say? And I just wrote back, good writer, better pig. It's really funny. This is so morbid, and I don't think I've ever said this out loud before, but you know, sometimes when a celebrity dies, like you hear how they're remembered or what's said on the news, and sometimes I think, God, what are people going to say about me when I'm gone? And what I really just hope people say is that I engaged with controversial topics that opened up people's minds. That would be like the best takeaway.
And so for now, 3 rapid ending questions. And again, it's been such a pleasure. All right. What's something you wish for tonight's audience?
Oh, wow. I hope the sleet doesn't start before you leave. How's that?
What's something you wish for New Hampshire or the United States? Oh, well.
A blue wave.
And what would you like the last word of this interview to be?
Thank you. That was great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's great.
But,
do you want to do the questions?
No, you're going to do the questions.
Okay.
I've just.
Let me get them.
Yep.
Okay. Where did they go?
Just when you thought we were done.
So we are having questions tonight, and unfortunately we were doing them in advance, so people hopefully wrote in with them.
Maybe I'll stay.
So we'll not be taking questions from the audience.
Okay. You all sent some beautiful questions in. I can't read all of them. I'm going to read a few in our time here. So, Jean asks, after traveling to so many places in the world, are there spots you'd like to return to?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are definitely places I love being, places I've gone on vacation with my family. I had the best experience this summer in England because we were rehearsing our show in London, and I got to live like in a neighborhood, not just be a tourist, but live in a neighborhood. And that was really, really cool. I really enjoyed that. God, I've had some amazing vacations. Everywhere from islands like the Galapagos to, the Caribbean. I think I'm always looking for the next place that I really, want to visit. I know I want to go to Portugal because my son-in-law, his family is Portuguese, and when my little grandson's old enough, I want to go there with him. And I am dying to go to the Maldives, but I would have to drug and hog-tie my husband because he does not do planes well, and it's a very long flight.
Pam wonders if you've ever experienced writer's block, and if so, how do you get over it?
I do not believe in writer's block, and I'll tell you why. Okay, all you guys, remember when you were in school and you had an essay due and you had writer's block? Remember how miraculously that writer's block cleared up the night before the essay was due? So writer's block is having too much time, really, to worry that you're not going to get it right. And what I have always found, because when I started writing, I had babies. I mean, I literally was writing when my kids, were in nursery school, and I was typing on a laptop in the pickup line, or at swim practice, or when Barney was on TV. Anytime I could, I had 5 minutes, and I would sit down and write. So when you don't have a lot of time, you just do the work. And I always feel that, I've said this many times, you can edit a bad page, but you cannot edit a blank page. Write something and then fix it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm probably going to say that tomorrow in class.
Perfect.
That's perfect.
You may.
All right. In the past few months, there have been a few articles discussing the decline of the humanities and the liberal arts in higher education as college students concerned about their employment prospects forego a major in humanities or arts. Can you speak about what you gained from your undergraduate experience as a writing major and share any advice you have for young people who are considering pursuing an arts or humanities degree?
Absolutely. So do you want to know what my first job was? It was not a writer. My first job was working on Wall Street. I should take this time to mention I cannot balance my checkbook. The reason that I was hired was because at the time, Solomon Brothers was looking for someone who could write the bond offering circulars for Standard & Poor's and Moody's. So there was this time when I knew more about the company Fiat than anybody on the planet, because I was writing this 200-page document about Fiat, which I really did not care about. I was really lucky because the stock market crashed in October of '87, and I got a severance package. It all worked out. But the point is, when all of my friends were getting paid $11,000 to get coffee for editors, I was getting paid a lot more than that, and all I was doing was writing. That is what a degree in the humanities gives you: critical thinking skills and writing skills, and those are transferable to almost any career.
Two people in the audience asked similar questions. One noted that he's been to the Galapagos Islands and could picture each location and wish you were here. Can you speak about how you go about researching material for your books?
Sure. That's actually a really interesting question in particular for Wish You Were Here, because that book was a book I was not supposed to write. I did not have a contract for it. I did not expect to be writing a book then, but it was during COVID, and I was really, really scared during COVID because I have asthma, and I really did not leave my house, because I was terrified before we had vaccines. And I felt very out of control, and I've never felt quite that out of control before. And for me, I think as an alternative to therapy, I decided to control someone else's life, which was a fictional character. And I came up with this idea based on a story I'd heard about a man from Scotland who got stuck, it was a Japanese man who got stuck in Machu Picchu when all the borders closed during COVID. And instead of trying to find his way back home, he wound up becoming part of the community, and he stayed for months in, in the village closest to Machu Picchu. He was teaching martial arts to the kids there. And finally, the community petitioned the government to open up Machu Picchu for him so he could have his own private moment at this beautiful site. And I was like, wow, what must it be like to be in, the ultimate bucket list destination when the whole world has gone to hell? And I've never been to Machu Picchu, and I sure wasn't going during COVID. So I was like, okay, where have I been that is a bucket list destination? And years earlier, like a decade before, I had taken my family to the Galapagos. So I went down and pulled out all of our photos so I could look back through them and see what I remembered. And I decided that's what where I was going to set this book. And I knew that I wanted to find someone who had experienced that, and I did a little digging, and sure enough, I found a Scottish man who got stuck in the Galapagos for, I think it was about 7 or 8 months before he was able to leave, and tracked him down, did a whole bunch of interviews with him, all by Zoom, did interviews with people who he had met and who he had lived with in the Galapagos, and the entire book was basically written through a computer because of it.
Okay, our last question. Do you have any advice for early career writers or people contemplating a writing career? How should they get started?
Again, I mean, I kind of touched on this earlier. There are so many different avenues open to people nowadays. I can only speak to the path that I took, which is traditional publishing. And what that usually requires, what it does require, is for you to actually sit down and finish a product and then to use it to get an agent. Because in traditional publishing, if you send an unsolicited manuscript, meaning one without an agent, to a publisher, it will go into a slush pile and likely will not be read. So you have to have that agent who is going to be the one representing you and sending it out and connecting with editors and trying to get you that publishing contract. A lot of people are shocked to hear that I had over 100 rejections from agents before I found mine. And the woman who became my agent, who 30 years later is still my agent, had never represented anyone before. She was starting out, and she's like, I think I can represent you. And I was like, okay, great. And she sold, she did not sell my first book. My first book was written as a thesis when I was at Princeton. None of you should ever read it. It's somewhere buried in a basement in a library there. But it taught me how to write a book. And because I couldn't sell that one, I was writing another book, because that's what you do. You just keep writing. And she took that second book and sold it in about 3 months. And so that is how my career started. But I had, a long list of queries that did not pan out very well. And my favorite story about that is actually that when I first hit the New York Times list, I got a call from a publicist who said there was an agent who really wanted to speak to me. And she wanted to fly me in to New York for the day to talk about representation. And I said, well, I'm really quite happy with my agent and my representation. And I'm also quite sure she does not remember that she was the first agent to reject me. So my advice to those who are starting out and who are querying and maybe are not having any luck yet is stick with it, because karma is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, everybody.
So, Alex, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I have to say, Alex thought of this program ages ago, and I'm so glad that we could make it happen. Jodi, thank you for being here. It's really wonderful having you. And
thank you. Thanks so much.
So, a few points of order before we close for tonight. Thank you for being part of the kickoff for our 50th anniversary. We are going to have, Jodi is being very, very kind and is going to be doing a book signing. To get to the book signing, this is the most important thing. They gave me my notes. Don't go to the lobby. Go straight back behind the theater. There will be a line that forms in the reception room back there that will feed to where the book signing is. If you have mobility issues, however, if you can't get down the steps there, please go to the will call desk and we'll take care of you there. I hope that if you are new to New Hampshire Humanities, you'll come back. We do this a lot, although not with Jodi. We'd like to do that again. If you want to find out more about the organization, look at newhampshirehumanities.org online, find our program, make a donation to our organization, see what's happening around the state, go to the book signing. Thank you on behalf of the board and myself. It's a pleasure hosting you tonight.